Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Fortress. Cole Brennan stood in his garage workshop, methodically sharpening a hunting knife against the whetstone. The rhythmic scraping filled the silence of his empty house, a sound that had become his meditation over the past year. The blade gleamed under the fluorescent lights as he tested its edge against a piece of paper, watching it slice cleanly through. At 42, Cole possessed the build and demeanor of someone who had never backed down from a fight. His calloused hands spoke of a man who built things, fixed things, and when necessary, destroyed things. As a contractor specializing in high-end security installations, he understood the value of patience, precision, and the right tools for every job. The framed photo on his workbench showed happier times. Cole, his wife Linda, and their 8-year-old son David at a camping trip last summer. David's gap-toothed grin and Linda's warm smile seemed to mock him now. The accident had happened 6 months later, or so he'd been told. The official story was burned into his memory. Linda had been driving David to soccer practice when a drunk driver ran a red light. The impact had been devastating. David died instantly, they said. Linda survived with minor injuries, carrying the guilt that Cole initially thought would bond them in their shared grief. Instead, it had driven a wedge between them that grew wider each day. Cole set down the knife and picked up a manila folder, one of many he'd compiled during his year of supposed mourning. Inside were photographs, documents, and timelines that painted a very different picture of that tragic day. A security camera across the street from the accident scene had captured something the police report somehow missed. Linda's car had been parked at the location for nearly 10 minutes before the collision. She'd been on her phone the entire time. The drunk driver, a repeat offender named Gary Hutchins, had been released from county lockup just hours before the accident after posting bail for his third DUI. What the police didn't know, what Cole had discovered through his own investigation, was that Gary owed a significant gambling debt to certain individuals who weren't known for their patience with debtors. Cole's phone buzzed with a text from his younger brother. "Mike, still coming to dinner Sunday? Mom's making her famous pot roast." He typed back, "Wouldn't miss it." Family dinners had become his anchor, the one place where he could pretend normalcy still existed. His parents, Thomas and Patricia Brennan, had built their construction company from nothing, instilling in their sons the values of hard work, loyalty, and the unforgiving principle that betrayal was the one sin that could never be forgiven. Linda emerged from the house, car keys in hand. She moved differently now, less confident, constantly looking over her shoulder. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she wore the same black dress she'd favored since the funeral. The grieving widow persona had served her well. "I'm going to my sister's," she called out, not making eye contact. "I'll be back late." Cole nodded without looking up from his work. "Drive safe." As her sedan disappeared down the street, Cole opened another folder. This one contained surveillance photos taken by a private investigator he'd hired 3 months ago. The images showed Linda's grief counseling sessions that actually took place at a downtown apartment complex. Her counselor was a man named Trevor Hollis, 35, divorced, and a former insurance adjuster who had handled their claim after David's supposed death. Trevor had been the one to expedite their settlement, pushing through the paperwork with unusual efficiency. He'd also been the one to recommend the specific funeral home that had handled David's closed casket service. The same funeral home where Cole had discovered, through careful inquiry, that the casket had never actually contained a body. Cole closed the folders and checked his watch. Linda would be at Trevor's apartment within the hour, and his surveillance equipment would document every moment of their reunion. But documentation was just the beginning. After a year of careful planning, it was time to start building the trap that would bring them all together for one final performance. He walked to a locked cabinet in the corner of the garage and removed a small electronic device, a GPS tracker with a battery life of 6 months. Tonight, while Linda slept peacefully beside him, he would attach it to her car. Tomorrow, the real hunt would begin. Chapter 2. The Call. The phone rang at 2:47 a.m., jolting Cole from the light sleep that had become his norm. He answered on the second ring, instantly alert. "Mr. Brennan? This is Detective Ray Morrison with the Metro Police Department. I'm sorry to wake you, but we need you to come down to the station immediately." Cole sat up, his heart rate steady despite the adrenaline. "What's this about, Detective?" "Sir, we found your son, David." The words hit Cole like a physical blow, but not for the reasons Detective Morrison would expect. His blood didn't turn to ice. It began to burn with a heat he'd been carefully banking for months. "That's impossible," Cole said, playing his part. "My son David died in a car accident last year. My wife was driving." "Sir, I understand this is confusing, but we have a boy here, about 9 years old, who says his name is David Brennan. He gave us your address and phone number. More importantly, he says his mommy told him to change his name and hide." Cole's grip tightened on the phone. The trap was springing earlier than expected, but he was ready. "I'll be right there." He dressed quickly in jeans and a flannel shirt, then gently shook Linda awake. Her eyes snapped open with the hypervigilance of someone living with secrets. "The police called," he said, watching her face carefully. "They found a boy who claims to be David." Linda's complexion went ashen. That's impossible. David is." She couldn't finish the sentence. "Dead." "Yes, I know." Cole's voice carried just the right mixture of confusion and hope. "But they want me to come identify him. You should stay here, in case this is some kind of mistake or cruel prank." Linda nodded quickly, relief flooding her features. "Yes, that's probably best. I couldn't handle if someone was playing a sick joke." Cole kissed her forehead, tasting the salt of cold sweat on her skin. "I'll call you as soon as I know something." The drive to the police station took 15 minutes through empty streets. Cole used the time to prepare himself for what was coming. He'd known this day would arrive eventually. His investigation had revealed that David was alive and being hidden in a rural farmhouse 2 hours outside the city. What he hadn't expected was for his son to escape on his own. Detective Morrison was a 20-year veteran with tired eyes and the paunch of a man who lived on coffee and vending machine food. He met Cole in the lobby with the expression of someone delivering tragic news. "Mr. Brennan, I want to prepare you for this. The boy has been through some kind of trauma. He's been living under a different name, Joey Patterson, with a woman who claimed to be his aunt. When we found him wandering on Highway 34 tonight, he was confused and scared, but he insisted his real name was David Brennan." They walked through a maze of desks and interview rooms. Through a one-way window, Cole saw his son for the first time in over a year. David had grown taller, his sandy brown hair longer than Linda usually kept it. He was wearing clothes that didn't fit properly and clutching a small backpack. "He keeps asking for his dad," Detective Morrison said softly. "Says his mommy told him Daddy thought he was dead and that he needed to stay hidden until she came back for him." Cole's jaw clenched. Who was this woman he was living with? Rebecca Patterson, age 56. Claimed she was doing a favor for a friend. Thought it was a temporary custody arrangement. We're still sorting through her story, but it seems she genuinely believed she was helping a mother in distress. They entered the interview room, and David looked up. For a moment, father and son stared at each other across an impossible gulf of betrayal and manipulation. Then David launched himself into Cole's arms. "Daddy, I knew you'd find me. Mommy said you were sad because you thought I was dead, but I'm not dead. I'm right here." Cole held his son tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of his hair, feeling the solid reality of his small body. Over David's shoulder, he caught his reflection in the one-way mirror and saw his own eyes, cold and calculating even in this moment of reunion. "It's okay, buddy," he whispered. "Daddy's here now. Everything's going to be okay." But even as he comforted his son, Cole's mind was already racing ahead to the next phase of his plan. Linda would be making frantic phone calls within the hour. Trevor would be involved in whatever contingency plan they'd developed for this scenario. And somewhere in the chaos of their panic, they would make the mistakes that Cole had been waiting for. Detective Morrison cleared his throat. "Mr. Brennan, we're going to need to ask you and your wife some questions. This situation raises a lot of concerns about what exactly happened during that accident." Cole nodded, still holding David. "Of course, Detective. We want to get to the bottom of this as much as you do." He looked down at his son. "David, can you tell me about the lady you were staying with? How did you end up with her?" David's face scrunched in concentration. "Mommy brought me there after the loud crash. She said it was like a game, and I had to be Joey for a while. She said you were hurt and couldn't take care of me, but when you felt better, she'd bring me home. But she stopped coming to visit, and Miss Rebecca started crying a lot and saying she didn't know what to do." "When did you last see Mommy?" Cole asked gently. "A long time ago. Maybe Christmas? She brought presents and said I had to keep being Joey a little longer." But I got scared when Miss Rebecca started talking about calling the police, so I ran away to find you." Detective Morrison was taking notes, his expression growing more serious with each revelation. "Mr. Brennan, I think we need to have a much longer conversation about your wife's whereabouts on certain dates, and about this accident that supposedly killed your son." Cole stood up, lifting David in his arms. "Whatever you need, Detective. But first, I want to take my son home where he belongs." As they walked toward the exit, Cole felt the familiar weight of his phone in his pocket. Soon, he would call Linda with the news that would shatter her carefully constructed world. And then, the real game would begin. Chapter 3, Unraveling. Cole drove home slowly, giving himself time to think while David dozed in the passenger seat. The boy had fallen asleep almost immediately after buckling his seatbelt, exhausted from his ordeal and overwhelmed by the reunion. His small hand still clutched Cole's jacket, as if afraid his father might disappear again. The house was dark when they pulled into the driveway. Linda's car was gone. Not surprising, considering she'd probably fled the moment Cole left for the police station. But her absence confirmed what Cole had suspected. She had a detailed escape plan for exactly this scenario. He carried David inside and tucked him into his old bed, which Cole had left exactly as it was the day of the supposed accident. The Star Wars posters, the collection of Hot Wheels cars, the stack of chapter books they'd been reading together, everything preserved like a shrine to a dead child who had never actually died. Cole sat on the edge of the bed, watching his son sleep. David's face was thinner than before, and there were shadows under his eyes that spoke of confusion and trauma that no 9-year-old should endure. Linda would pay for that. They both would. His phone buzzed with a text from Linda. "My sister had an emergency. Staying the night. Call if you hear anything about the boy." Cole smiled grimly. Even now, she was maintaining the charade. He typed back. "It was David. He's alive. Come home now." The response came immediately. "What? How is that possible? I'm coming." 15 minutes later, Cole heard Linda's car in the driveway. She burst through the front door with an Oscar-worthy performance of shock and confusion, her hair disheveled and her makeup smeared as if she'd been crying. "Where is he? Where's David? How is this possible?" She rushed toward the stairs, but Cole stepped into her path. "He's sleeping. The last thing he needs right now is more chaos." Cole's voice was calm, measured. "We need to talk." Linda's eyes darted toward the stairs, then back to Cole. "Talk. Our son is alive. Our dead son is upstairs sleeping in his bed. What is there to talk about except miracles and—" "Cut the act, Linda." The words hung in the air between them like a blade. Linda's expression shifted, the grief mask slipping for just a moment to reveal something calculating underneath. "I don't know what you mean," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Cole walked to the mantelpiece and picked up a manila envelope he'd placed there earlier. "David told me some interesting things at the police station. About the woman he's been living with. About the game you told him he was playing. About the visits that stopped around Christmas." Linda backed toward the door. "Cole, you're not making sense." "I don't understand what." "Rebecca Patterson," Cole said, opening the envelope and pulling out a photograph. 56 years old. Lives on a farm outside Millerville. David knew her as Aunt Rebecca, but she's actually Trevor Hollis's mother. The color drained from Linda's face. For a moment, Cole thought she might collapse. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin in a gesture of defiance he recognized from their early arguments as newlyweds. "You've been investigating me," she said. It wasn't a question. "For 11 months, Cole confirmed. "Ever since I noticed that the timeline of David's death didn't match the insurance claims. Ever since I discovered that the funeral home never actually received a body. Ever since I realized that my grieving wife was spending her afternoons with the insurance adjuster who fast-tracked our settlement." Linda's mask finally cracked completely. "You don't understand the pressure I was under. The debt collectors calling every day. The mortgage payment we couldn't make. David's medical bills from his asthma treatments. We were going to lose everything. So you decided to kill our son instead?" "I didn't kill him." Linda's voice rose to near hysteria. "The accident was real. But when I saw the opportunity to let people think he died, it solved everything. The insurance money, the sympathy, a fresh start." Cole stared at his wife of 12 years as if seeing her for the first time. "You faked our son's death for money. You let me grieve for a child you knew was alive. You let me blame myself for not being there to protect him. It was supposed to be temporary, Linda said, tears streaming down her cheeks. Just until we got back on our feet. Then we were going to find him, say he'd been kidnapped or had amnesia or something. No one would have been hurt. No one would have been hurt. Cole's voice dropped to a whisper. Do you have any idea what this year has been like for me? Do you know how many nights I've sat in his room, wondering if I could have saved him? How many times I've considered eating a bullet because I couldn't protect my own son? Linda reached for him, but Cole stepped back. Cole, please. We can fix this. David's home now. We can be a family again. The money is still there. We can give it back. Say there was a mistake. Where's Trevor? The question stopped Linda mid-sentence. She stared at Cole with growing fear. I don't know what you mean. Cole pulled out his phone and showed her a photograph taken earlier that day by his surveillance equipment. It showed Linda and Trevor embracing outside his apartment building. Your grief counselor. Your lover. Your accomplice. Cole's voice was deadly calm. Where is he, Linda? Linda's shoulders sagged in defeat. He's probably at his apartment. Cole, what are you going to do? Cole slipped the phone back into his pocket and walked to the front door. He paused with his hand on the doorknob, looking back at the woman who had been his wife, his partner, the mother of his child. I'm going to make sure that everyone who betrayed my son pays the price, he said. Starting tonight. As Cole drove away from his house, Linda was already dialing Trevor's number with shaking fingers. In the rearview mirror, he could see her pacing frantically in the front yard, gesturing wildly as she spoke. By morning, they would both understand that the trap Cole had been building for nearly a year was finally closing around them. And unlike the mercy he'd once shown his enemies in business dealings, this time there would be no forgiveness, no second chances, and no escape. Chapter 4. The Players Revealed. Trevor Hollis lived in a converted warehouse apartment in the Arts District, the kind of space that screamed midlife crisis, with its exposed brick walls, industrial fixtures, and carefully curated collection of vinyl records. Cole had been watching the building for months, noting the security cameras, exit routes, and the fact that Trevor's unit had a private entrance through the alley. At 4:30 a.m., Cole sat in his pickup truck across the street, waiting. He'd changed clothes after leaving Linda at the house, dark jeans, black tactical boots, and a navy work shirt that would blend into shadows. The toolbox in his truck bed contained more than just standard contractor equipment. His phone had been buzzing nonstop with calls from Linda. He'd turned it to silent after the 15th attempt. Let her panic. Fear would make her sloppy, and Cole needed her to make mistakes. A black BMW pulled into the alley behind Trevor's building. Cole smiled grimly as he recognized the driver, Trevor himself, arriving earlier than usual. Linda's frantic calls had worked exactly as Cole intended. Trevor Hollis stepped out of his car, a man trying too hard to look younger than his 35 years. His designer jeans and expensive sneakers spoke of someone with more money than sense. According to Cole's investigation, Trevor had been living well above his insurance adjuster salary for the past year, funding his lifestyle through a combination of Linda's death benefits and a side business that Cole was still unraveling. Cole waited until Trevor disappeared into the building, then gave him 10 minutes to settle in. During that time, he reviewed the files he'd compiled on Trevor's background. Divorced 3 years ago after his ex-wife discovered he'd been forging claim documents. No children, which meant fewer complications. His mother, Rebecca, owned the farm where David had been hidden, but according to Cole's research, she was genuinely unaware of the deception, another victim of her son's scheming. The building's security was laughably simple for someone with Cole's expertise. A basic card reader at the main entrance, one camera in the lobby, and magnetic locks on the apartment doors that any halfway decent locksmith could bypass. Cole had installed similar systems in dozens of buildings. He knew every weakness. He made his way to the 4th floor using the emergency stairwell, avoiding the single security camera. Trevor's apartment was at the end of the hall, 4F. Cole could hear voices inside, muffled but urgent. Linda had arrived ahead of him. Cole pressed a small listening device against the door and inserted an earpiece. Their conversation was crystal clear. Told you this was a bad idea from the beginning, Trevor was saying. We should have stuck to the original plan. The original plan was to give it 6 months. Linda's voice was shrill with panic. It's been over a year. Your mother was getting suspicious, asking too many questions about when I was coming back for David. Mom thought she was helping a woman in an abusive relationship. I never told her the truth about what we were doing. And now what? Cole knows everything. He's been investigating us. He has photos, Trevor. Cole smiled. The listening device was also recording everything, evidence that would prove valuable later. We need to leave, Trevor said. Tonight. I have money saved, new identities prepared. We can be in Mexico by tomorrow afternoon. What about David? We can't just leave him with Cole. Why not? That was always the end game, right? David goes back to his father. We disappear with the money. Everyone's happy. Everyone's happy. Linda's laugh was bitter. You didn't see Cole's face tonight. He's not going to let this go. He's going to destroy us. Only if he can find us. Cole had heard enough. He removed the listening device and pulled out his phone, sending a quick text to his brother Mike. Need a favor. Big one. Can you be at the warehouse in 20 minutes? Mike's response was immediate. On my way. Cole returned to his truck and waited. 20 minutes later, Mike's construction van pulled up beside him. His younger brother was 38, built like a linebacker, and had never asked unnecessary questions when Cole needed help with the dirty work of running a business. What's the situation? Mike asked, climbing into Cole's passenger seat. Remember how I told you I thought Linda was hiding something about David's death? Yeah. Well, David's not dead. He's home, sleeping in his bed. Linda faked the whole thing with her boyfriend so they could steal the insurance money. Mike's face darkened. The Brennan brothers had been raised with old-school values about family loyalty and the consequences of betrayal. What do you need me to do? Cole handed him a manila folder. Trevor Hollis, apartment 4F. He and Linda are planning to run tonight. I need you to make sure Trevor doesn't make it to his car. Mike flipped through the photos and documents. How permanent are we talking? Not permanent. Just educational. I want him scared, hurt enough to reconsider his travel plans, but alive enough to face what's coming next. And Linda? Linda's mine. Mike nodded and checked his watch. Give me 30 minutes. As Mike walked toward the building, Cole drove around to the front entrance. Linda would be leaving through the main lobby, and when she did, he'd be waiting. This was the beginning of a very long night, and by sunrise, both Linda and Trevor would understand that the year of easy money and secret romance was over. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mr. Brennan, this is Detective Morrison. We need to speak with your wife tomorrow about some inconsistencies in the original accident report. Please have her call me. Cole typed back. Of course, Detective. She'll be very interested to hear from you. In the rearview mirror, he could see Mike entering the building through the alley door. In a few minutes, Trevor Hollis would discover that stealing from Cole Brennan came with consequences that no amount of money could fix. Chapter 5. Setting the board. The text from Mike came at 5:47 a.m. Package delivered. Going to need some ice. Cole was parked outside a 24-hour diner 3 blocks from Trevor's apartment, watching Linda through the window as she sat alone in a corner booth, shaking hands wrapped around a coffee cup. She'd been there for 2 hours, occasionally checking her phone, growing more agitated with each passing minute. Cole walked into the diner and slid into the seat across from her. Linda's eyes widened in terror when she saw him. Expecting someone else? Cole asked mildly, signaling the waitress for coffee. Cole, please. We need to talk about this rationally. Where is he? Linda's face was pale and drawn, dark circles under her eyes making her look older than her 38 years. I don't know what you mean. Trevor, your boyfriend, your accomplice, the man who's been helping you spend our son's death benefits. Cole's voice was conversational, as if they were discussing the weather. He seems to have disappeared. Linda's phone buzzed. She grabbed it eagerly, then her face crumpled. Oh God, what did you do? She showed Cole the message. In the hospital. Don't trust him. Run. I didn't do anything, Cole said truthfully. But Trevor discovered tonight that actions have consequences. A lesson you're about to learn yourself. Linda started to stand, but Cole caught her wrist. His grip was gentle but unbreakable. Sit down, Linda. We're going to finish our conversation. You're insane. I'm calling the police. Go ahead. Cole released her wrist and leaned back. Tell them how your boyfriend is in the hospital because someone broke 3 of his ribs and dislocated his shoulder. Then tell them why he deserved it. Linda stared at him, searching his face for some trace of the man she'd married. You're not the same person I fell in love with. No, Cole agreed. That person died the day I thought I buried my son. What you're looking at now is what's left when someone takes everything from a man and expects him to just accept it. The waitress brought Cole's coffee. He sipped it slowly, studying Linda over the rim. Detective Morrison wants to speak with you today about inconsistencies in David's accident report. Seems they're reopening the investigation. Linda's hands began to shake more violently. Cole, I can explain everything. The money situation was desperate. The medical bills were crushing us. You thought you'd solve our problems by murdering our son. I didn't murder him. The accident was real. But you saw an opportunity in the chaos, didn't you? Cole's voice remained calm, but his eyes were ice cold. When David was unconscious in the hospital, when the other driver died at the scene, when you realized there was a window where you could make David disappear and claim he died in the crash. Linda wiped tears from her cheeks. It wasn't supposed to go on this long. We were going to bring him back. Stage a discovery. Say he'd been confused, wandering around with amnesia. For over a year? You were going to let our son think his father didn't want him for over a year. Children adapt. He would have forgotten. Cole's hand slammed onto the table hard enough to rattle the coffee cups. Several other diners turned to look, but Cole's stare sent them back to their own conversations. Don't you ever, he said quietly, talk about what children adapt to. Don't you dare pretend that what you did to David was anything less than torture. Linda was crying openly now. What do you want from me, Cole? What do you want me to do? Cole pulled out his phone and placed it on the table between them. I want you to call Detective Morrison and tell him you're ready to give your statement about David's fake death. I want you to confess to insurance fraud. I want you to return every penny you stole. And then what? I go to prison. That's up to the courts. Cole finished his coffee and stood up. But first, you're going to help me with one more thing. What? You're going to help me find out who else was involved in this scheme. Because I don't believe for 1 second that you and Trevor came up with this plan on your own. Linda looked confused. There wasn't anyone else. It was just us. Cole smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Linda, in the past year, you've collected over $300,000 in insurance money, legal settlements, and death benefits. Trevor's been living like a man with a 7-figure income on an adjuster's salary. Either you're both criminal masterminds, or someone with connections helped you pull this off. I don't know what you're talking about. The drunk driver who killed David, or was supposed to kill David. Gary Hutchins. His gambling debts were forgiven the week after the accident. The funeral home director who helped you stage the closed casket service. The emergency room doctor who signed off on David's death certificate without actually examining a body. The insurance investigator who rubber-stamped your claim without a proper investigation. Linda's face went white. How do you know all this? Because I've spent 11 months learning everything there is to know about everyone involved in my son's supposed death. Cole dropped a 20 on the table for the coffee. And now you're going to help me have a conversation with each of them. Cole, please. I just want this to be over. It will be over, Cole promised. When everyone who betrayed my family has paid the price. Starting with the people who made it possible for you to fake David's death in the first place. As Cole walked toward the door, Linda called after him. What about us? What about our marriage? Cole turned back to look at her one last time. Our marriage ended the day you decided our son's life was worth less than an insurance payout. What happens to you now depends entirely on how helpful you are in cleaning up this mess. Outside the diner, Cole got into his truck and started the engine. Phase 1 was complete. Trevor was neutralized, Linda was broken, and the web of corruption that had enabled them was about to be exposed. But Cole's real target wasn't the money or even the accomplices. His real target was making sure that David never again had to wonder whether his father would choose him over everything else in the world. And that meant ensuring that the people who had traumatized his son faced consequences that would serve as a permanent reminder of what happened to those who hurt the Brennan family. Chapter 6. The Network Exposed. Cole spent the morning at home with David, making pancakes and watching cartoons as if the previous night's violence had never happened. His son was clingy but resilient, asking careful questions about where he'd been and why Mommy had told him to hide. Daddy, was I really supposed to be dead? David asked during a commercial break. Cole pulled his son closer on the couch. No, buddy. You were never supposed to be dead. Some people made very bad choices, but you're safe now. Is Mommy in trouble? Yes, Cole said honestly. She is. But that's not your fault, and it's not something you need to worry about. David nodded seriously. Are you going to leave me again? Never, Cole promised. I will never leave you again. At noon, Cole's parents arrived to stay with David while Cole went to handle business. Thomas and Patricia Brennan were both in their 70s, but still sharp as razors. They'd built their construction company through decades of 16-hour days and had passed down to their sons an understanding that family came first, always. "How bad is this situation?" Thomas asked quietly while Patricia fussed over David in the kitchen. "Worse than I thought initially," Cole admitted. "Linda didn't just fake David's death for insurance money. She's been working with a network of people, some corrupt, some just greedy, who've been facilitating this kind of fraud for other families." His father's expression darkened. "How many other children?" "I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out." Cole had spent the early morning hours reviewing files he'd compiled on everyone connected to David's case. The pattern was becoming clear. Dr. Elizabeth Canfield, the emergency room physician who had pronounced David dead, had signed off on suspicious death certificates 3 other times in the past 2 years. Marcus Webb, the funeral home director, had conducted 4 other closed casket services for children where no body was actually interred. Insurance investigator Paul Hendricks had approved unusually quick payouts for 7 families in similar circumstances. This wasn't just about Linda and Trevor. This was about a systematic operation that had been stealing children and defrauding insurance companies, with parents as willing accomplices. Cole's phone rang. "Mr. Brennan? This is Dr. Canfield from Metropolitan General. I understand there's been some confusion about your son's case, and I'd like to discuss." "Dr. Canfield," Cole interrupted. "I was hoping to hear from you. Are you available to meet this afternoon? I have some questions about the night you pronounced my very much alive son dead." There was a long pause. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding was thinking you could get away with it. 2 o'clock, your office. Don't make me come find you." Cole hung up and called Linda. She answered on the first ring. "Cole, what do you want?" "I want you to call Dr. Canfield and tell her you're ready to explain how she helped you fake David's death certificate. Then I want you to call Marcus Webb and Paul Hendricks and arrange meetings with them as well." "I can't do that." They'll what? Stop helping you commit felonies?" "That's the point, Linda. You don't understand. These people aren't just going to confess because we ask nicely. They have too much to lose." Cole smiled grimly. "You're right. They have everything to lose. Which is exactly why they're going to cooperate." At 2 p.m., Cole walked into Dr. Elizabeth Canfield's office at Metropolitan General. She was a woman in her 50s with prematurely gray hair and the tired eyes of someone who'd been making moral compromises for too long. "Mr. Brennan, I want you to know that I genuinely believed your son had passed away that night. The trauma to his head and chest was severe, and in the chaos of the emergency room." "Dr. Canfield," Cole said, sitting down across from her desk, "let me save us both some time. I know about the other 3 children you've declared dead who turned up alive later. I know about the payments you received from families grateful for your quick processing of paperwork. I know about your gambling debts and the medical malpractice suit you're trying to settle quietly." Dr. Canfield's face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." Cole placed a manila folder on her desk. "These are bank records showing payments from 4 separate families to your personal account, all within weeks of you signing death certificates for children who weren't actually dead. This is a copy of your credit report showing $180,000 in gambling debts to 3 different casinos. This is documentation of the malpractice suit filed against you for misdiagnosing a heart attack that led to a patient's death." Dr. Canfield opened the folder with shaking hands. "How did you get this information?" "I'm very good at finding things people want to keep hidden." Cole leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to write a detailed confession explaining exactly how this scheme works. You're going to provide me with the names of every family you've helped fake their children's deaths. And you're going to return every penny you were paid for your participation. And if I refuse, then I give this information to the police, the state medical board, and every news outlet in the city. Your medical license will be revoked, you'll face criminal charges for fraud and conspiracy, and you'll spend the next decade in prison." Dr. Canfield stared at the documents for a long moment. "There were 7 families," she said quietly. 7 children declared dead who are actually alive and hidden with relatives or accomplices. Most of the parents planned to find them eventually, but some decided the money was more important than getting their children back. Cole felt rage building in his chest. "Give me their names." "Mr. Brennan, you don't understand what you're getting into. This network involves people with serious connections. Politicians, judges, police officials. They don't just steal money. They destroy anyone who threatens them. Let them try, Cole said. Give me the names, Dr. Canfield. All of them. As she began writing, Cole realized that saving David was only the beginning. Somewhere in the city, 6 other children were being hidden from parents who thought they were dead. And somewhere else, parents were living with insurance money earned by selling their own children into a system designed to make them disappear. By the end of the week, Cole would know every name, every location, and every detail of the network that had stolen his son. And then he would begin the systematic destruction of everyone involved, starting with the people at the top and working his way down until every child was returned and every conspirator was either dead or in prison. The war for David was over. The war for justice was just beginning. Chapter 7. The Reckoning begins. Cole spent 3 days methodically working through Dr. Canfield's list, cross-referencing names with financial records, property deeds, and surveillance footage from his network of contacts in the security business. What he found was a sophisticated operation that made Linda and Trevor look like amateur criminals. The network was run by a man named Vincent Russo, a former insurance executive who had turned fraud into an art form. Russo owned several properties where children were hidden, employed a team of corrupt officials who facilitated the paperwork, and had been operating for nearly 5 years. According to Dr. Canfield's records, he'd helped fake the deaths of over 30 children, collecting millions in insurance fraud. But what made Cole's blood run coldest was the discovery that not all the children were intended to be returned to their families. Some were being sold to buyers who wanted untraceable children for purposes Cole didn't want to contemplate. David was at school. Cole had enrolled him under police protection after Detective Morrison agreed that the boy needed normalcy while the investigation proceeded. Linda was in custody, having confessed to her role in the scheme as part of a plea deal. Trevor was still in the hospital, but he'd also agreed to cooperate after Mike's visit had left him with a very clear understanding of his situation. Cole stood in his garage workshop, methodically cleaning and loading a .45 caliber pistol. Beside it on the workbench were zip ties, duct tape, a small blowtorch, and a toolbox full of instruments that had never been intended for construction work. His phone rang. Mr. Brennan? This is Agent Sarah Martinez with the FBI. We understand you've been conducting your own investigation into a child trafficking operation. Have I? Cole continued loading bullets into the magazine. Mr. Brennan, we need you to stop what you're doing and let us handle this situation. We have teams moving on several targets today, including Vincent Russo. Cole smiled grimly. Agent Martinez, how many children have you recovered in the past 5 years of this operation running under your noses? There was a pause. Sir, we only became aware of the full scope of this network recently. The answer is 0. You've recovered 0 children because you didn't know they existed. Cole holstered the pistol under his jacket. I recovered my son in one night because I was willing to do what you're not. Mr. Brennan, if you interfere with our investigation, you'll be charged with obstruction of justice. If your investigation fails to bring home every missing child and put every conspirator in prison, you'll have bigger problems than obstruction charges to worry about. Cole hung up and walked to his truck. He had 2 stops to make before the FBI could organize their careful, by-the-book operation that would probably result in plea deals and reduced sentences for everyone involved. His first stop was Marcus Webb's funeral home. Webb was a thin man in his 60s who affected the somber demeanor of his profession while running a side business in fake funerals for very much alive children. Cole found him in his office, frantically shredding documents. Going somewhere, Marcus? Cole asked, closing the office door behind him. Webb looked up with the expression of a man who'd been expecting this visit. Cole Brennan, I wondered when you'd show up. Then you know why I'm here. Your son is safe. That's what matters. The rest of this is just business. Cole moved faster than Webb could react, grabbing the older man by the throat and slamming him against the wall. Business? You helped steal my son and 30 other children. You made their parents think they were burying their babies. You call that business? Webb clawed at Cole's hand, gasping for air. Please, I can explain. Cole released him, letting him drop to the floor. Explain how you sleep at night. Explain how you look at yourself in the mirror. Explain how you decided that children's lives were worth less than whatever Russo was paying you. The money, my wife's cancer treatment. I needed the money. So you sold children. Cole pulled out the pistol and pressed the barrel against Webb's forehead. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to give me the location of every property where children are being held. You're going to provide me with the real names of every family involved. And you're going to transfer every penny you earned from this operation to an account I'll specify. And if I refuse? Cole cocked the hammer. Then your wife becomes a widow today, and I find the information another way. Webb's hands shook as he reached for his desk drawer. The files, they're all here. Addresses, names, financial records. Everything. 20 minutes later, Cole walked out of the funeral home with a box of documents and Webb's terrified promise to confess everything to the FBI. His second stop would be more challenging. Vincent Russo lived in a fortified compound outside the city, 15 acres surrounded by high walls, security cameras, and armed guards. Cole had spent 2 days studying the property, noting weak points and guard rotations. The FBI would need warrants, tactical teams, and hours of preparation to breach the compound. Cole had a different approach. He parked his truck a mile away and hiked through the woods that bordered Russo's property. The tree line came within 50 yards of the main house, and Cole had spotted a gap in the camera coverage where the trees cast deep shadows. As the sun set, Cole moved through the shadows like the predator he'd become. He'd learned patience during his year of investigation, but now patience was a luxury he could no longer afford. Somewhere in this compound were children who'd been stolen from their families, and every minute they remained captive was another minute of trauma that could never be undone. The first guard never saw Cole coming. A sleeper holed from behind, and the man dropped unconsciously to the ground. Cole zip-tied his hands and feet, then moved toward the house. Through a window, he could see Russo, a heavy-set man in his 50s, talking animatedly on a phone, probably coordinating his own escape now that the network was beginning to collapse. Cole smiled coldly. Russo wouldn't be escaping tonight. Or ever. Chapter 8. No Forgiveness. Cole moved through Vincent Russo's compound like a ghost, neutralizing 3 more guards with efficiency that would have impressed his military instructors from 20 years ago. The house itself was a monument to wealth built on stolen lives. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and artwork that cost more than most people's homes. He found Russo in a panic room behind his office, frantically loading money and documents into a bag while speaking in rapid Italian on his phone. The room's steel door was impressive, but Cole had installed similar systems and knew their weaknesses. 15 minutes later, Cole had bypassed the electronic locks and stood in the doorway of the panic room. Russo spun around, his face going white when he saw the armed figure silhouetted against the light. Vincent Russo, Cole said conversationally. The man who turned stealing children into a business model. Russo's hand moved toward a pistol on his desk, but Cole's gun was already trained on him. I wouldn't, Cole advised. We have too much to discuss. Who are you? FBI? Police? I'm a father, Cole said. A father whose son you helped steal. A father who's here to collect what you owe. Russo's eyes darted around the room, looking for escape routes that didn't exist. Look, if this is about money, we can make a deal. I have accounts all over the world. Millions of dollars. We can split it. This isn't about money. Cole stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. This is about justice. Justice? Russo laughed nervously. You think what you're doing is justice? Breaking into my home, threatening me with a gun. No, Cole said. What I'm doing is just the beginning. He zip-tied Russo's hands behind his back and forced him to sit in a chair. Then he pulled out a tablet and showed Russo a series of photographs. Children in various hiding places, families grieving over empty coffins, bank records showing millions in fraudulent insurance claims. 37 children, Cole said. 37 families destroyed. 5 years of operation. How many of those children were you planning to return to their families, Vincent? Russo remained silent, but his expression told Cole everything he needed to know. The answer is none, Cole continued. You never planned to return any of them. The insurance fraud was just the beginning. You were selling them. You don't understand the market, Russo said desperately. These families were willing participants. They signed contracts. They knew what they were getting into. Cole backhanded Russo hard enough to split his lip. They thought they were participating in temporary insurance fraud. They didn't know you were trafficking their children to buyers overseas. Blood trickled down Russo's chin. Prove it. You have no evidence of trafficking. No evidence of sales. Just the word of desperate people trying to reduce their sentences. Cole smiled and pulled out his phone. Actually, I have your computer files, your encrypted communications with buyers, your shipping manifests, your financial records showing payments for special deliveries to clients in 3 different countries. Russo's face crumpled. How did you? I'm very good at finding hidden things, Cole said. While you were panicking about the FBI investigation, I was copying your entire digital operation. Bank accounts, contact lists, delivery schedules, everything. Cole stood up and walked to a cabinet in the corner of the room. Inside, he found what he was looking for, a small blowtorch used for welding jewelry. Here's what's going to happen, Vincent. You're going to give me the locations of every child you're holding. You're going to provide the contact information for every buyer you've dealt with. And you're going to transfer every penny of your operations profits to accounts that will be used to reunite families and provide therapy for traumatized children. And if I refuse? Cole lit the blowtorch, the blue flame casting dancing shadows on the walls. Then we're going to have a very long conversation about pain and how much of it you can endure before you tell me what I want to know anyway. Russo stared at the flame, sweat beading on his forehead. You're insane. You can't torture information out of me. This isn't some movie. People will know what happened here. People already know what happened here, Cole said. The FBI is probably surrounding your compound right now, but they'll need hours to breach your security, obtain warrants, and process the scene. That gives us plenty of time to discuss your crimes in detail. Cole held the flame close to Russo's face, not quite touching, but near enough for the man to feel the heat. Did you know that David, my son, spent over a year thinking his father didn't want him? Did you know he cried himself to sleep every night for months, wondering what he'd done wrong? I didn't know the details of individual cases. You knew enough. The flame moved closer. You knew you were trafficking children. You knew families thought their babies were dead. You knew buyers were purchasing human beings for purposes that didn't bear thinking about. Russo broke after 10 minutes. The combination of physical threat and psychological pressure shattered his resolve, and he began providing information faster than Cole could write it down. Locations of safe houses, names of corrupt officials, contact information for buyers in Mexico, Eastern Europe, and Southeast Asia. By the time the FBI breached the compound 40 minutes later, Cole had everything he needed to dismantle the entire network. Russo was unconscious, but alive, zip-tied to his chair with a detailed confession written in his own handwriting sitting on the desk beside him. Cole had vanished into the woods before the tactical teams reached the house, taking with him the information that would lead to the recovery of 36 children and the arrest of over 100 accomplices worldwide. Agent Martinez would later find Cole's truck parked outside the FBI field office, keys on the dashboard, and a note that read, "The children are at these locations. The buyers are expecting deliveries at these times. Move fast, or more kids disappear forever." Cole himself was nowhere to be found. He'd completed his mission and extracted his justice. Now it was time to disappear before the legal system tried to prosecute him for methods they couldn't officially sanction, but privately understood were necessary. Chapter 9. The Price of Betrayal. 3 months later, Cole sat in a small cafe in Costa Rica, reading a newspaper article about the largest child trafficking bust in FBI history. 36 children had been recovered from safe houses across 3 states. Vincent Russo had been found dead in his federal holding cell, apparently by suicide, though Cole suspected other trafficking victims' families had found their own form of justice. Linda had been sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for her role in the conspiracy. Trevor Hollis had received 12 years after his testimony helped convict 17 other conspirators. Dr. Canfield, Marcus Webb, and a dozen other accomplices were awaiting trial on charges ranging from fraud to conspiracy to commit kidnapping. Cole's phone buzzed with a text message. The number was blocked, but he recognized the communication method. His father, using an encrypted app. "David asks about you every day. When are you coming home?" Cole typed back. "Soon. How is he?" "Strong. Like his father. But he needs you." Cole had been living off-grid since the night he'd extracted Russo's confession, moving through Central America while federal agencies debated whether to charge him with assault, kidnapping, and obstruction of justice. Agent Martinez had privately told him through intermediaries that the FBI was inclined to overlook his methods given the results. But Cole wasn't taking chances with his freedom. Not when David needed him. The money from Russo's operation, over $15 million, had been distributed to the families of recovered children for therapy and support services. Cole had kept nothing for himself except the satisfaction of knowing that every conspirator had paid a price for their crimes. But the real price of betrayal wasn't measured in prison sentences or recovered assets. It was measured in the permanent severing of bonds that could never be repaired. Cole had received one letter from Linda during her incarceration. She'd written about regret, about understanding now what she'd lost, about hoping that someday he might forgive her and they could rebuild their family. He'd burned the letter without finishing it. There could be no forgiveness for someone who had used their own child as commodity. No second chances for someone who had let Cole grieve for a son she knew was alive. Linda was David's biological mother, but she would never be part of their family again. Cole paid for his coffee and walked toward the small airport where a private charter was waiting. It was time to go home. 2 hours later, Cole was airborne, watching the Central American coastline disappear below him. By tomorrow morning, he would be back in the United States, ready to face whatever legal consequences awaited him. But first, he would see his son. The plane landed at a private airfield outside the city where Mike was waiting with a truck. "Welcome home, brother," Mike said, embracing Cole tightly. "Ready to be a father again?" "I never stopped being a father," Cole replied. "I just had to finish being a soldier first." They drove through familiar streets toward the house where Cole had spent a year grieving for a son who wasn't dead. The house where Linda had played the role of grieving mother while secretly planning to steal their child's life. The house that would now become something new, a fortress where David could grow up safe, loved, and certain that his father would never let anyone hurt him again. David was waiting on the front porch when they pulled into the driveway. He'd grown taller during Cole's 3-month absence, his face thinner and more serious than a 10-year-old should be. But when he saw his father, his expression transformed into pure joy. "Dad." David launched himself into Cole's arms with the force of someone who'd been afraid he might never see his father again. "I'm home, buddy," Cole whispered, holding his son tightly. "I'm home, and I'm never leaving you again. Promise, promise." As they walked into the house together, Cole felt the rage that had sustained him for over a year finally beginning to fade. He'd done what needed to be done. Every betrayer had paid their price. Every stolen child had been returned to their family. The network that had traumatized his son was dismantled, its leaders dead or imprisoned. Linda would spend the next 15 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole. She would never again have the opportunity to hurt David or any other child. Trevor and his accomplices faced similar fates, their lives destroyed as completely as they had tried to destroy the families they'd betrayed. There would be legal battles ahead. Cole would face charges for his vigilante justice, though his lawyers were confident that public sympathy and the results he'd achieved would lead to minimal sentences. The FBI had already offered him consulting contracts for future trafficking cases, recognizing that his methods, while extreme, had accomplished what traditional law enforcement had failed to do. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was David's hand in his as they walked up the stairs to his son's bedroom. What mattered was the trust in David's eyes when he asked his father to check for monsters under the bed. What mattered was the knowledge that Cole had honored the most fundamental obligation of fatherhood, protecting his child at any cost. As David drifted off to sleep, Cole sat beside his bed, watching the slow rise and fall of his breathing. Tomorrow, they would begin building a new life together. They would travel, explore, create new memories to replace the trauma of the past year. David would grow up knowing that his father was a man who never broke his promises, never abandoned his family, and never forgave those who betrayed the people he loved. Cole stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street where he'd once thought his life had ended. Now he understood that it had simply been transformed. He was no longer the trusting husband and father he'd been before Linda's betrayal. He was something harder, more dangerous, but also more devoted to the people who earned his loyalty. In the distance, he could see the lights of the city where Vincent Russo's criminal empire had crumbled, where corrupt officials were facing justice, where 36 families were rebuilding their lives with children they'd thought were lost forever. Cole smiled grimly and pulled the curtains closed. The war was over. Justice had been served. And somewhere in a federal prison, Linda was learning that the price of betraying a Brennan was measured not in forgiveness, but in consequences that lasted a lifetime. The rule was simple: betray the family, lose everything. Cole had made sure that rule was permanently understood by everyone who had hurt his son. Now it was time to focus on the future, a future where David would never again have to wonder whether his father would choose him over everything else in the world.